Good day, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Youth Perspective. This is a podcast that, of course, aims to discuss and offer some fresh perspective on the role of youth in addressing different social and political issues across the globe. This podcast is, of course, brought to you by the Calv Youth and, of course, through the support of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom. This is the first of this podcast's 10 episode. And of course, we are on Spotify, Apple Music, SoundCloud, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. I am Joel Domingo, the National Chairperson of the Liberal Youth of the Philippines, the youth wing of the Liberal Party here. And of course, I'm very, very, very pleased and happy to be your host for today. I am, of course, joined here by none other than Ted Hui Chi Feng, a former member of Hong Kong's Legislative Council and a youth activist, and of course a very vocal supporter of freedom, democracy, and human rights. Hi Ted, how are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm doing good despite this pandemic. Would you please introduce yourself? Tell our audience a little bit more about yourself.
Sure, and of course, thank you for inviting me. It's my honor to be in the first episode. And Child Youth actually shaped me a lot during the past 10 years, and I have had a lot of interactions and exchanges at events joined by Child Youth. And so a bit about myself, I'm a Hong Kong politician and activist. So I've been in politics for more than 10 years in Hong Kong. So I first served as a district councillor at the municipal level, and then for on 2016, so I was elected to the legislature and became MP of Hong Kong. But I only served 4 years because after that, Hong Kong has changed so much, and with the new regime and new draconian laws passed in Hong Kong, and all oppositions are either disqualified or being thrown to jail or in exile. So I'm one of those who are in exile. That's why I'm currently in Australia, and I spent my last half 6 months in the UK and also in Denmark. So there will be a long time before I can go home, I guess. So what I do now is that I devote myself full time on advocacy work for Hong Kong's freedom and democracy, and that is my life mission. I hope I can go back home one day.
Yeah, and we all are longing and hoping that you'd be able to come home very, very soon, hopefully, no? It's nice meeting you, although it's in this situation, but however, it is still very nice to meet you. This is actually the first time that Ted and I are meeting, and despite that, of course, we are still hoping, no, to have a very meaningful and insightful conversation. So today we will be discussing several things about youth activism, in particular how can us, the youth, get a seat at the table. And we'd very much like to hear more about your stories, the experiences that you've had. It is very much an inspiration to all the young people out there, especially also to me, to us. No, we are also in a situation where more and more democracy is the foundations of democracy are getting weaker and weaker by the day. And this conversation would be very helpful to all of us, to all young leaders and liberals out there. But before we head on and deep dive into this very, very important conversation, I'd like to first ask you if you could give our audience the youth perspective. What for you is the seat at the table? I ask this because a lot of people assume like everyone knows it, right? People would say youth should be active and get a seat at the table. Some would even say that the youth should demand to have a seat at the table, as if everyone knows what it is. But in reality, it's not. the term seat at the table, comprehension of that, knowing that, and actually trying to have that. It's not really common knowledge. Not all young people know that they should have a seat at the table. Um, so I just want to, with your help, of course, I just want to to give our audience some clarity and offer the youth perspective. What does it mean to actually have a seat at the table? Why is it so special? What is that most coveted table that a lot of people, especially those who have been there for quite some time, doesn't want to let go?
Yes, that's a very long story, and that's a very good question to start with. And let's start with what do you mean by youth? Okay, a person at my age, I'm 38, can be young in politics, but if I think of myself back 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I started my political career at my mid-20s. I first run public elections for public office at the year of 25.
Wow.
And then, yeah, of course, that time I lost. And then I run again at the year of 27. And then that's my first victory in politics. So holding a public office. And then only at the year of 34, I got into the legislature and served as an MP. So if I think back to those days at my early 20s, I would say that I never really was that ambitious as to being politicians and being in politics, being an abstract, setting up my goal as an MP. It wasn't me. So what I thought, what I put my efforts in, more in the social activism. So I devoted myself in volunteering in a political party, but I think there's a context in Hong Kong that Hong Kong wasn't a full democracy, and of course it's not a democracy at all now. But it's only half democracy. So even you climb higher and higher on the ladder, you never get to the position of being the government yourself or being the ruling party. There's no such thing as ruling party in Hong Kong, as long as you're on the democratic side. So I didn't think of getting a seat at the table as my career. It is part of the social movement. It is part of being the change itself. So I thought it that way at the beginning and throughout my political career, and until the time I quit and be in exile. I never changed that thought. That is being youth. I think it's important to stick to the values.
Yeah.
Stick to what you really believe, and don't care too much about whether you will get a seat at the table finally. Even if you don't, I believe you can still get a seat. And think of in a Hong Kong context, think of people like Joshua Wong. He never managed to get a seat in Parliament, but he was so influential, and he got on Time magazines, and he met very important politicians in the world, and had direct conversations with free world leaders. If you think of that, being the change itself doesn't equal to having a seat at the table. I think it's important to bear that in mind. Don't get this political prospect or even hot prospect to affect you too much and be indulged in it too much. And I believe it's also in an Asian or Southeast Asian culture that having a seat, being an MP, being a legislator, is a very high up position.
Yeah.
And I have my friends in Philippines or in India told me, oh, you're an MP, so you're like God to us. We should worship you. No, there's nothing like that in Hong Kong, in Western culture. So it's all along my political career, it's a value, and it's the change that drives me. And I have my determinations throughout the process that even at the middle of my term, I will lose everything. I'll lose all my power. I'll lose my seat. I'll lose my influence. It doesn't matter if I can be the change. I'm willing to sacrifice all these. I think having that determination in mind, it helped me to stick to the values and to not to be influenced too much by staying in power. I think that's very, very important for youth, and that is my firm belief.
Yeah, so from what I'm hearing, I love everything that you said. I agree completely. Um, from what you said, it seems like having a seat at the table doesn't necessarily equate to having a possession in the government, right? Uh, yes, it's important to have a seat at the table, but having a seat at the table could mean that you could participate in different democratic and civic affairs and help shape the national conversation. And you don't have to necessarily be in the government to shape the national uh, conversation or the national discourse. And in your case, what you're doing right now is actually helping shape the narrative and the conversation for the fight of Hong Kong, not inside Hong Kong, but in the international arena. So it's still very much helpful. It's still you having a seat at the table from what you've said. And I totally agree. I completely agree with that. And more importantly, I totally agree that um, sometimes having a seat at the table won't help anyone if you're not grounded on your values, if you're not grounded on the principles that if no principles guide you at all. And that's very inspiring, and that's very motivating. I just want to talk about something that you've said a while ago. You said that you started your political career when you were 20 years old, right? And then you lost when you were 25, and then tried to run again in when you were 27. I just want to ask, what made you, number one, what made you run? Yeah, when you were what made you start when you were 20 years old, and despite losing when you were 25, what sparked you, what motivated you to still continue the fight and still run when you were 27?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another long story. So I started at my early 20s. I joined the political party, the Democratic Party of Hong Kong, uh, when I was studying uni. But at that time, studying was really busy, and I'm not a student leader type of person, so I didn't take part in unis and in student activity that much. Instead, I joined and had a party membership in a mainstream political party, and there I thought I could volunteer some of my time in volunteer work for that. And what motivated me is that it's because I studied law and political science in uni, and I actually studied abroad in Canada for 3 years. So I had a taste of what Western free society and democracy is like. And when I came back to Hong Kong, I thought it's really not okay to go on like that, because Hong Kong needs a lot more freedoms, and Hong Kong needs to be free from the authoritarian regimes of Beijing. That's why I at that time I still believe that now, that party politics is important to gather people with same values, like-minded people. That's why I started in the political parties and try to make the change from inside the institutions. So at that time, even it's not a democratic system, even our legislature is only half democratic, but having a seat in the council, in the legislature, is still very influential. So I thought I'm more research and study oriented type of person. I thought I can develop myself from that to generate policies and to write policy papers and submit it to the government, parliament to make a change. And at the same time, I'm also a street person, I would say. And I joined every street demonstrations for freedoms and all the June 4 massacre commemorations and all the demonstrations against the government for introducing evil laws that would unbind our rights. So I haven't really missed one occasions when there are street protests. So there are two limbs. So I first by trying at the age of 25 contesting in local elections. I lost because I was a bit not mature enough and lack of preparations. But then I had a taste of what democratic election is like when you really try really hard and work in a community and to serve the people and gain the respect from people. And it's very satisfying. And I can see that even I didn't get a seat, didn't get elected, but in the middle of that, in the process, what I earned is gathering of people's hearts. And what I want, I didn't win the elections, but I won the people's heart. I believe so. And so that is the motivations. And you know that you are making the changes. You are shaping the society, the little community you're serving. And from that, you know that if you try really hard, if it's a democracy, it's fair. You keep spreading the messages, you keep showing the good of you and the ideological beliefs behind, that people will be convinced. And if you have that sort of perseverance in heart, I thought that next time I'll win because I'm with the people, I'm confident. So it's a matter of how much effort and perseverance you hold in it, and that's why I tried second time and I won.
Yeah, that was a very moving story. I love your story because a lot of people, for example, in my country, a lot of young people in my country start their career in politics because their parents are politicians, because their families are politicians, not because they want to serve. And somehow, on some level, there are some young politicians who start out thinking that I want to serve, to I want to serve my country, I want to serve my constituents, but at the end of the day, they get eaten by the system of this rotten system somehow. What I love from your story is that number one, you started out because you experienced. No, you went out of your comfort zone and you've experienced so many things. And then when you came back to Hong Kong, you realized, wait a minute, none of this is real. This is a fake democracy, and it should stop.
Exactly.
And then from there you started out your career, and then every step of the way you've become a successful politician because you never stopped participating, you never stopped volunteering, you never stopped trying new things. And I think that's one of the takeaway from your story, that it's very important for young people to get out of their comfort zones and try new things, participate, because sometimes our comfort zones are not real. Sometimes it's, in your case, it's a fake democracy, right? So it's something that only courageous young people like you could go in, and your story needs to be told because it will help a lot more young people to be courageous and to try new things and to participate and to try and fight for something that they truly believe in. And that something that they truly believe in can only come out from experiencing a lot of things, right? So, and you cannot experience things when you're staying in your comfort zone. So
That's true.
yeah. So
just one point to add, because in Hong Kong now we realize that after experience all the plights and all the political situations, we realize that a democracy is not about I cast a vote to my representative, and in the upcoming 4 years, I can be laid back. I can just get my hand free, but you do all the job for me because I voted for you. It's not like that. I think especially as youth, as a young person, it really shouldn't be the case. You should be the ones who stand up and come out, even though you're not running politics. But you can always engage yourself in civil society, in social movement, in the political parties. So find your positions in the society and really push forward what you are good at, what you're talented at. And I think that's the attitude that what young people should have. And of course, running for public office yourself is challenging. But if you really want to be the change, yes, you're right. Break your comfort zones, walk into other zones, and stay there and really stick to your belief no matter what. I think that's what young people should really do.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Ted. I totally agree. It's very important for young people out there to participate, to experience new things, and to learn from those experiences, and to always put their values to test, to question, and to scrutiny even. And then from that process, they could easily find some more courage to actually subscribe further to those values, and it's actually very very important, and that could be very much represented from the story that you've told. Now that we know that youth activists across the region, or even across the globe, it doesn't just happen here in the Philippines, it doesn't just happen in Hong Kong, it happens everywhere. And we know that despite them, youth activists being persecuted, despite that, it's still very important for young people to find courage and to be part of the conversation, or even to shape the conversation. But I think it's a question that is very important to be answered in this podcast is, how do we make tangible changes, learning from the experiences of people like you, young activists like you, getting persecuted for speaking out. What could the learning of young people, what could we get from your story, and how do we make actual, real, lasting, tangible change?
Yeah, of course. You mentioned the word courage, and I think that's one very important characteristics of us youth. And so if you look at young activisms and look at freedom movements around the globe, first started in Hong Kong, and then in Belarus, and then in Thailand, and very brutally now in Burma. And all these freedom movements are led by youth and led by young people. And I very much appreciate and express my gratitude towards them for having sacrificing themselves, their studies, the future, their lives, but we really need to stick to that and start from that. And for going back to my example, my situations, I told you about I wasn't ambitious in developing my career in politics, but it's all about making changes. So my determination was like I was determined to go into politics, not because I appreciated the systems. It's a rotten system like yours, like what you mentioned in Hong Kong. But even it's so rotten, if you that's the reason you really have to be inside and to call me radical and to damage what it is like and to rebuild the ideal systems. So there's a lot of confrontations in between. I remember I believe I'm the first politicians being thrown or physically removed, evicted from a meeting room by the police themselves. So the police had to come into the meeting rooms to remove me physically because I insisted so much that what I said was right and what I said about justice was right. So even facing an eviction order about the chairpersons, I refused to move. That's why. So there's a lot of competitions and people get prosecuted and thrown to jail. But I guess that's something that's the trait that the youth have, but not the adults, but not the very senior ones. So we really need to treasure that and to magnify that in our decision makings. So it's very sad, of course, now as I'm outside seeing those who are in jails, seeing those who lost their lives. But they are then our motivations because you understand that they took their courage, they took the decisions. Now they can't speak anymore, and it's our time to speak for them. And I believe that that's something young people really need to remember. That's our responsibility. But if you talk about tangible takeaways, I believe that it's the techniques and it's how we make the call. For example, because when I mentioned the freedom movements in different countries, Hong Kongers started was the frontiers in this wave of freedom movements. So we had leaderless platform. It's not really a platform. We had the slogan "Be water." So we should act like waters, and we should be flexible, but we should be powerful. And we have created different methods of mobilizing people through social media, and we created our own songs and developed our own identities. So I think these are the techniques that need to be shared. And actually, the fight, the struggle in Burma, their leaders actually contacted me and quite a few Hong Kong leaders about our experiences, and so they're trying to use them and to copy them in face of their authoritarians and brutal governments in their own protest. I think we need to have a lot more connections and sharings and solidarities among us youth in different around the globe, so that we reassure among ourselves and in the international communities and amongst authoritarian governments that we are one. The youth in the world are one. Now we are united and we fight for our freedoms and democracies together. And that's very important. I still remember when in previous Carl Youth events when I talked to my Singaporean friends who fight for freedom in their own countries. It's very, very tough. And it's like I asked a naive question. So you guys go to jails for all the protests? And they laughed at me, actually. They said, who never been in jails among us ourselves? Everyone did. And they were ready for the prize. And I still remember asking this like 7, 8 years ago when Hong Kong people were not prepared at all in going to jail. So having these kind of exchanges shaped us and prepared us for tougher and tougher battles in the future, and that's very important.
I love that you've mentioned being connected to many people and fighting together, because it makes you know whatever it is that you're saying, if you're saying it just by yourself, it's doesn't really make a dent, right? But if a lot of several different people are saying the same thing, then it could potentially create a change, right? And then I also love that the way that you explain courage, and how sometimes for the things that you value the most, and for the things that a lot of people, and for the things that a lot of people take for granted, like for example, democracy and freedom. But there are some people, very brave and courageous people, who are willing to go to jail. And sometimes it's a matter of knowing that uh, some people are willing to let to how do you call this? Some people are willing to go to jail to fight for something that some people are taking for granted. And knowing that, sometimes it sparks something in you that helps you. Oh my God, I honestly feel like I value democracy and human rights and freedom. Therefore, I am also now, because I've learned this story, now I'm willing to go to jail. No, and not much people hear other people and think, na, wait, I'm scared to go to jail. I'm not gonna go anywhere near them, right? But there are people like you who stands up and becomes more courageous because of the stories of other people. And I think that's very important. I highlighted that because I think it's very important, because a lot of young people think that their role in a democracy or in nation building or in building or in defending freedoms or expanding freedoms even, a lot of young people think that it's only about acting, doing protest or running for public office. A lot of people think that that's their only role in nation building. But really, one of the most important, if not the most crucial role of young people out there is to actually lay the groundwork for political participation, for youth political participation, right? Because honestly, if an older people would tell me like you should join this protest because this is about your freedom, it's very unlikely if I'm not immersed in this fight, for example. It's very unlikely that I join that old people. But if a young people, like for example, an idol of mine, my brother, tells me, or my friend tells me, you should join us in this protest. This is something fun, but at the same time, you're fighting for something that could potentially help the next generations. It's more likely that I join them, right? Because the young people are telling me, but a youth is telling me that this is fun. This fight for freedom and democracy is fun. So it's like one of our roles really is to share stories, to connect to as many people, as many young people as possible, and just to lay the groundwork for participation, for them to be able to say, oh, it's okay to participate, even if there are some dangers to it. It's okay to participate because here's this young people, here's this young person telling me it's okay because it's important, right? And it's part of our role. It's part of our role really as youth, and it's one of the things that could help us, right? That could help us in this fight. It's one of the things that could help the future generation fight less, right? And yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're here. We're talking about this is to share the importance of youth activism, to share the importance of having a seat at the table, and to share that having a seat at the table doesn't necessarily mean you being in government. It also means that you participating in conversations, right? In different protests, and there are different kinds of protests, right? And I think that's that's one of my very very important takeaway in takeaways in this conversation, and I thank you
Yeah.
for that.
If you talk about the metaphor of having a seat at the table, I would say young people should grab their own seat and put their own seat at the table no matter what. This is my seat. I have my right to say it because I firmly believe in that. You don't have to wait for other people to give you that seat. You grab the seat yourself and just be there and speak out. It's very important. It reminds me of how young people, there's party member at their early 20s, runs and challenge the chairpersons of my political party for the position of chairpersons. So people were quite shocked at that time. So you're only out for a couple, not long ago, and then you're challenging the leader. And I think it's for young people to start of revolutions. So it's a sensitive term now, especially in Hong Kong. But I'm not talking about an armed fight, but it's about not believing that what you can see is always right, and the system that you're in is always right. Always challenge from the bottom to the root of the system, and start making a system to think what seems to be unimaginable. I think that should be what that young people that they should do.
Yeah, I totally agree. I completely agree with what you said. It's very, it's quite funny, right? That in our personal lives, for example, a lot of young people would say, why am I not, would tell their parents, for example, why am I not allowed to go out? I mean, I'm 13 years old. I can go out, right? It's easy. It's normal for young people to question rules, to question limitations, to question boundaries, because it's part of our nature as a young person, right? But when it comes to the social political context of our country, not many young people do that. Not many young people question that, right? And it takes a lot of being in so many conversations, being in so many discussions, and sometimes being in a protest, for example, being in an extreme environment, or sometimes being in a not so extreme environment, but still somehow gets to them that, oh, it's time to act now, right? So I think for us young leaders, I think that's also one of the challenges that we need to tell people, or we need to do something about, right? Letting people understand that it's okay to question, it's okay to criticize, because criticizing leads to something better, right? Leads to something better. Otherwise, we'd be stagnant, right? And yeah, I appreciate your story, and of course the story of Hong Kong, because you've used technology, you've used innovation, you've used so many. I cannot imagine how how Hong Kong pulled a protest, a massive movement that doesn't have one command, that doesn't have one leader telling them that this is what we should be doing, etc., etc. It's sometimes it's what the story of Hong Kong is very magical somehow, because it was able to capture so many people's imagination. You were able to do that, and you still continue the fight despite the dangers, despite the possibility of people getting jailed, and you've been jailed yourself, but still you continue the fight. And I think it's this conversation is very important, because it shows that, like what you said, we should grab a seat at the table. It's not given to you. It will never be given to you. Just like any life opportunities, it will never be given to you. You have to look for it. You have to grab it. You have to take it. And
Exactly.
yeah. So thank you very much, Ted. Is there anything else that you'd like our listeners and audience to hear about? Or is there anything else you want to share?
Yeah, maybe just my closing remark that young people should uh, stand up together. And so in the past, I participated in the Multi Alliance internationally, and I'm not sure that Filipino milk tea is nice or not. I've never tried that, but of course, I understand that quite many of us in Southeast Asia, they are under persecutions. They've been taken away their basic rights and freedoms. They should really stand up. And now I realize, as a more international person, that it's really important to have allies. So I hope to tell the young people, especially in Southeast Asians, that you have allies in us, in all of us, and that we should fight internationally, and you're not alone. And so just stand up for it and grab the seat and make a stance. And I believe that we will make it. So let's fight on.
Thank you so much, Ted, for being the kind of person that you are, for being the inspiration that you are to many many of us young people and young leaders. And we hope that you can come home soon, and we hope that you can visit us here in the Philippines whenever it's safe, of course. And we hope to have many more conversations like this, so that we could be more connected. We could you always know also that you have an ally in us as well. So we in the CALD youth, also in CALD, and of course us, the liberal youth, you will always find an ally in us, and we are just always one Zoom call away. Thank you very much for this wonderful, meaningful, and very insightful conversation. Thank you very much, Ted.
Thank you as well. Bye bye.
Okay, that's it. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Of course, we hope you could be with us again in our next episodes. This podcast is brought to you by the CALD Youth, the Liberal Youth, and the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. Thank you.